you know, you're like, all
oh
right.
my goodness, heck yeah.
All right, welcome everyone. Let's get started so that we have plenty of time to engage with our speaker today. I'm so excited for today's event. Welcome to our seminar series, Women in Global Health, Exploring Non-Academic Careers as part of the Emerging Women in Global Health Leadership Initiative here at Hopkins. It is a great way to start the day, Erica. I totally agree. So I'm glad everyone is here. As you come in, just a few notes of welcome. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, maybe add your LinkedIn. Make sure that you select everyone in the chat so that your messages are seen by everyone and not just the panelists. If the ongoing chat is distracting to you, which it definitely can be for some people, just close that chat box during the talk and reopen it at the end if you want to see what people have been talking about. But for sure, we like to keep the conversation going while our speakers are talking, share resources, etc. So that chat is there for you. I do ask if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A and not the chat, because that chat can be so busy. It's really great to have all of our questions in one space within that Q&A. Now, Megan is sharing some resources in the chat already. So we do want to invite you to join our community. The first step you've done here by showing up this morning and part of our regular seminar series where we feature women leaders in global health who have taken very different career paths, who share their leadership journeys. And this is one of our favorite things to do, and it's what we're doing this morning. But we also have a virtual network on Slack with now, I think, almost 900 members, and we're growing every time. And we have regular virtual networking events as well. So if you'd like to keep the conversation going and network with us, I believe Megan has posted a link in the chat to our Slack, and we'll post it a couple more times today to make sure that you've seen it. And then the last thing I'll mention is that this year we have a Summer Institute course here at Hopkins called Essential Skills for Women's Leadership in Global Health. It is virtual, it's synchronous. You can take it for credit or not for credit, and you don't have to be a Hopkins student to register. So everyone is welcome. And if you have any questions about that course, you can always reach out to me individually and separately. And we'd love to see people from all over the world in this course. It's a really fantastic experience. All right, that's enough about me. We're not here to talk about me. I want to talk about our wonderful speaker who is joining us from Singapore today. Dr. Hsien-Hsien is the Chief Executive Officer of the American Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, which is the largest and most active international business association in Singapore and Southeast Asia, with over 6,000 members representing over 550 companies. You must be busy. She is also an adjunct associate professor at the National University of Singapore Saw Swee Hock School of Public Health. She's a member of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health Advisory Board and a Hopkins alum holding a PhD in epidemiology. If there's anything I missed or anything you want to say about yourself, please feel free to do so. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lei to take us forward today. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I don't know why you started calling me Dr. Lei, because now I feel nervous having to call you Dr. Kalbarichik. I don't even know if I said that right. So hi, everyone. My name is Hsien. I am right now in Singapore, and I'm so glad to see that there are people joining from all over the world. And of course, I really appreciate those of you like from my home state, California, where I know it's super duper early in the morning. I will, it's really funny because Anna also said, do you have anything else you want to add? But clearly I'm going to be talking quite a lot about my own personal journey for the next hour or so, but not continuously. I really do want to hear from you. I really do want to hear what questions or thoughts you have on your mind. So it's gonna, I hope, be a conversation, even though we're in this webinar mode. So to start us off, before I dive into my journey, and I'll tell you a bit more about how I intend to tell you my story, I actually want to know what's on your mind today and what's been, percolating in your head about your career, what's been worrying you, what are you thinking about? So I'm going to actually share with you the Mentimeter code. I don't know if you can see it. I hope, Anna, do you see the Mentimeter code?
Yeah, we can see it. It looks great.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to scan the Mentimeter or type into a browser of your choice, menti.com, using the code 39976591. And then please, tell me what's on your mind. So I'm going to give you another minute, or no, I'm going to give you 10 seconds before I switch over to the Mentimeter screen, and then we'll see what's on everyone's mind, because that'll give me some gauge of what direction you all want to go in for this conversation that we're going to have this morning, afternoon, or evening. I think that's enough time to scan. And also when I switch over to the Mentimeter screen, you'll still see the link plus the code. So I think you won't, if you're a little bit, still catching up, you'll be able to do that there. So I'm going to stop share this slide for now. And I'm going to share the Mentimeter screen, which I see is already populating, which I love. And hopefully you can see the Mentimeter screen. So there are folks thinking about transitioning from PhD to non-academic career. Can certainly talk about that because that's certainly what I have done. Next steps, opportunities. Let's see, new MPH, congratulations on starting out on your public health journey. Or maybe you actually got your bachelor's in public health. We didn't have that. When I was an undergrad, it was not such a popular thing. Organizational change. I actually teach a class on healthcare organizational change each year at the Sosweak Hawk School of Public Health. We actually do the theory piece of it before we start talking about real world application. Taking risks, love that. We will definitely be talking about that. Physicians specializing in global health, thinking about which direction you want to go in, glass ceiling. And for those of us who are Asians, you may have also heard of the bamboo ceiling. So, and it differs depending on, and I think that this is the case for different ethnicities, but for Asians, we talk about the bamboo ceiling along with the glass ceiling for women. Let's see what else. Career switch from research to non-research. Yep, completely understand why you might want to explore different opportunities. Leadership challenges due to COVID-19. Maybe how to think about which job you should take and how do you make a step into that. Yeah, so it looks like people are thinking about change this morning, which is awesome because, I named this talk, Don't Look Back, Making Career Decisions or something like that in a time of change, because frankly, it's always a time of change, isn't it? So I'm going to put a stop to the sharing here and come back to what I'm going to share. First, let me share with you my story, and Anna's going to help me manage the questions so that I can make sure to address anything specific you want to share. What I have prepared for you is actually something that I use quite often, which is basically my personal bio on one slide. Now, back in the day when I was at Medtronic, I actually asked all of our senior leaders in the region to use something like this format because it was a good way to introduce themselves to their teams so they kind of get what's important to us. And as you see up in the left-hand corner, you already know my affiliations. And if we go to the right where I put down my goal, and this goal has actually been unwavering for me, that I really want to be able to help, to bring light, right? As I wrote down, important, often under-recognized issues. Because if you have a voice, you have the responsibility to help others who don't have that voice shine a light on the issues that they find important so that we can help people understand where they are in the world, where they are in it. Because if you don't have a realistic sense of where you are in the world, then how do you know whether you're going up or down, sideways, or how do you make progress, right? And how do you make a positive impact in our community? Now, what I love is I know this crowd is a healthcare crowd, most likely a public health crowd. And I have such fondness for Johns Hopkins, where I spent the formative years of my growing up life in my 20s. And so if we go to, I'm going to go from right to left, which is a bit of a Chinese reading kind of way. If you go to the right where you see core beliefs and you go down, you'll see one is that if we're in healthcare, if we're in public health, according to Richard Horton, who's the editor-in-chief of The Lancet, he has said that public health is a basic science of humanity. And so we can all feel really good in our hearts that what we're doing is tremendously meaningful, not just from a disease prevention perspective or let's get great health outcomes and all of that. Yeah, but from a societal point of view, I think it's really important what we do. And then below that, I have another quote that's also one of my favorites. If you have everything under control, you're not moving fast enough. And Mario Andretti, who's a racing legend, said that. And this is how you can tell yourself that. If you're getting really comfortable, and even if you're in the midst of change, if you're feeling like, yeah, things are going pretty well, it probably means that you need to step on it a little bit more to get further ahead and get into that, to reach your goal. So if you go then to the left, to the next box, which is education, I have been very fortunate to have experience in different parts of the world. So after I finished my bachelor's degree at Stanford, where coincidentally I met my husband who majored in international relations, so something quite different than human biology, which was my major. And that's going to factor into my story significantly. So, bookmark that. I decided to major in human biology rather than straight up bio because I was already interested in public health at the time. So it was really important to me that I had a holistic feel for healthcare and health, and again, that place that it holds in our society, and how do we think about it from an economic point of view? How do we think about it from an ethics point of view? So I was very fortunate to have a very good start to my postgraduate education at a university that had a degree like human biology. And if you go up, I was really fortunate to also be a predoctoral fellow while I was at Johns Hopkins. I received a cardiovascular disease epidemiology training grant from NIH, and that was what funded my doctoral work at Hopkins. I'm very grateful to my advisor, Joe Koresh, and another advisor, Fred Brancati, who has since passed away. And of course, Mike Clegg, who is a former dean. They all encouraged me and worked really closely with me during my time at Hopkins, including Dr. Terry Beatty, who is the genetic epidemiology guru at the school. When I finished my PhD, I actually did my postdoc in Taiwan. And that was actually my husband's first posting. He is with an airline, and his first posting was in Taiwan, which coincidentally is where I was born. So I was going back there as an adult, a working adult, and I had the good fortune of being at the world-renowned National Taiwan University Hospital. But that was also a pivotal moment for me, because that was when I realized that maybe my life was going in a different direction. I'll get back to that. So professional experience is a laundry list, but I have to tell you that I'm really incredibly proud to be able to support the school. And for those of you who are students, staff, or even faculty at the school, I am very proud to be part of the health advisory board, because it means that I can find a way to give back to the school. And if there's any chance that I have to be able to support you and your endeavors, please let me know. I am in Asia, so that provides a nice link between the school in Baltimore and Asia. And there are many of us here who would be very happy to be able to help you in any way, shape, or form, even though we're in a different part of the world. The other thing that I'm very proud of as well is that I am a newly elected vice president of the newly formed Precision Public Health Asia Society. As I mentioned before, my focus is in epi. I'm a genetic epidemiologist by training. And so what we're doing is looking more closely at how you can use big data in order to inform public health decisions. And so that still remains very much core to my identity. I still identify as an epidemiologist, as a scientist, even though, as Anna said, I actually now have a different kind of job as CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce. And again, I'll give you more of a feel for what that is like and how a scientist like me ended up in a job that is really business driven and commercial driven. So we'll get to that point once I start to tell you the different parts of my journey. Okay. Now, you see a picture of my family. I do have two children. My son, this is a slightly old picture, but it's not super old. My son is turning 20 this year. He's a freshman at Santa Clara University in Silicon Valley. And my daughter is turning 14 this year, and she's a rising 8th grader at the Stanford American International School here. And as I mentioned, my husband is the reason why I am in Singapore. He is Singaporean. And, we got married very young. We were a week out from graduating from college. We went to college together, and it was very interesting times. I, of course, went to Baltimore to study, and he decided to come back to Asia to work. And so, we knew that pretty much our future would be in Asia, because we do believe that Asia is a very important region, given that the majority of the world's population is here. And you can see that from an economic growth point of view, Asia is growing so quickly. We knew that we would be in a good place to take advantage of that. And because we're both American, US educated, I am Chinese American, that we would provide a really important link. We'd be the bridge between Asia and the US. And that was really what one of our goals would be for the achievements that we want to have in our life. You can see that throughout the course of our careers, as I mentioned, we've lived in different parts of the world. I was born in Taiwan, number one. Number two, then moved to the US when I was 7 years old. And then after that, I went back to Taiwan, as I mentioned, after I finished at Hopkins following which we moved to Nagoya, Japan. So if anybody's from Japan, hello. And then we spent 2 years in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, which is an amazing place, really a very fast growing economy. And then after that, we went to London, UK, which is amazing. As you know, the science, the history in the UK is really astounding. And we were very privileged to be there for a couple of years. And then in, let me think, 2008, we moved to Singapore, where we have stayed, and this is currently our home base. And so I've been here now for about 14 years full time. So as just to frame how I make decisions, and when I tell you about the three-parter of my journey, the one of the things that I was fortunate to go through, you take a lot of these personality tests, and I don't know how many of you, I'm guessing nowadays, even in high school, you would take some kind of personality assessment, some kind of psychometric testing. So when I was at Medtronic, I actually took the Clifton Strengths, and you can buy the book and you can take the test. And I really like the profile that I ended up with because it focuses on your strengths. And for me, the top 5 strengths that were identified are activator, command, futuristic, strategic, and ideation. And I feel like that is a very good descriptor of the way I make decisions and how I've ended up being from coming from epidemiology, which I dearly love, but actually straying quite far afield, but yet at the same time being an enabler for public health. So that's how I see myself. I'm an advocate of public health. I'm an enabler of public health. And despite the fact that I spend my time in different ways, I still am somebody who wants to activate ideas, help you execute on things. I am quite good at making decisions, like that command piece, and thinking about the future. And so this is me on a slide. But today, actually, what I really want to do is spend some time telling you. I'm going to stop sharing here. I'm just clicking on the button. What I really want to do is spend my time with you in 3-parters. And of course, you're free to put your questions in the Q&A box, or if you want to put it in the chat, and Anna will help me help bring my attention to your questions or your comments. And I take feedback very well. So if you want to give me some feedback, I'd appreciate that very much. So the 3-parter that I'm going to go through with all of you in terms of how I've proceeded with my career, starting with my epidemiology life, is I'm going to tell you about what I was up to in my PhD years and how that kind of set me up for how I decided to live the rest of time. And I'm also unabashed about sharing with you my age, because that is also something that influences all of us a lot when you hit critical milestones. I am turning 50 this year. And so that's informed some of my decision making along the way. And upon also like reflection about how my life has gone, that also is important because I'm thinking about what my next 10 years is going to be like. But I'm going to do 3-parter. Number 1, I'm going to tell you what it was like being a doctoral student, being those PhD years and what was swirling around in my head. And then, of course, then how it informed the next period of my life, which is really as a trailing spouse, still very much engaged, but in a completely different way. And I hope that it encourages you to also, as somebody said earlier, about thinking about taking risks and doing something different and overcoming some anxiety. And anxiety is actually something I think about quite a lot. And then the third piece of it would be my corporate life, which is the last more than 10 years of my life here in Singapore, because I entered the corporate world. And I think as a scientist, that's also very eye-opening. And I can share with you my tips and tricks about how to navigate that world. I think for me, this whole time is thinking about practical ways to navigate, because everything can be so theoretical. And I also attend these kinds of talks and I listen to people and I think, oh my gosh, this person is so amazing, but I cannot relate. So I think that's the thing I want you, for all of you on this call, is that I may have a different life experience, but all of us actually have very much shared experiences. So back in my PhD days, and you might be starting on your MPH, you might, have been thinking about getting a different graduate degree. When you decide to go for a higher education, many times you think, oh, what am I going to do with this thing after I'm done? Right. And then for those of us with PhDs, I think some of the expectation is probably I should stay and do research, because what the heck did I get a PhD for? And frankly, for me, I received an NIH grant and I'm so incredibly grateful. And I say this quite a lot now because of my current role representing US companies and engaging with US government. I really do appreciate everything the US government has done for me and my family, as well as just, the kind of funding for science and all of that. But as a doctoral student, my main goal was getting done. Because you know how sometimes PhDs can take a heck of a long time. And the reality was, as I mentioned, I had gotten married right out of college, and my husband was in a different part of the world. And so, of course, we wanted to be reunited as soon as possible, but we knew we had to, just really get down to it and get our work done. So that's fine. So it was very good. But because I didn't want to spend 8 years separated from my husband, I knew I had to focus. So first year you do your coursework, and I certainly focused on that. I'm trying to remember, right? Because you add it to your comps and you do all of the comprehensive exams. But my focus was in getting done and being efficient about it. So I have to say that I wasn't necessarily focused on a career path at that time, because certainly you're surrounded in academia, you're surrounded by people who are doing brilliant research, and you think to yourself like, okay, I'll do brilliant research. That's what I want to do too. So I didn't have any real doubts about doing research. It's just that, how am I going to get this done so I can get to my real life, right? And the weird part is, and this is just kind of random, but I guess my parents were in a different generation where they thought if a woman was going to reveal that she was married, it would certainly color people's perceptions and expectations of you, particularly because I was married so young. And now that I've lived in Asia, I can see why they think that, because in Asia, it is a very common ask when you go for interviews or you look for, to apply for opportunities. As a woman, you would be asked, so are you married? And the second question, if you say you are married, do you have children? And then the third question, if you don't have children, is, well, when are you planning to have children? Because they want to know if you're going to stop out to have babies or whatever your deal is, right? And it's not illegal to ask those questions. So in the US, of course, it's illegal. And I can see everybody say, yep, it definitely happens here. But my parents being Taiwanese, even though we've been in the US for many years already and were US citizens by then, they still had this innate fear that I might get pigeonholed or sidelined because I was now on this track of a married woman. So what's next for a married woman? Having babies, right? So they didn't want me to tell anybody I was married. So for all of you who are at this early stage of your career, you know what I say to that? I think one of the things that we need to do, and I think things hopefully have changed a bit, is that we need to break that stereotype, right? We need to help people understand that life includes all of these elements, and we need to find supportive bosses, supportive, advisors who will continue to sponsor us and elevate us, even if we are going to do these very normal life experiences, right? Having a baby in the middle of a PhD, I have friends who've done that and they've gone along and done wonderful things, but we have to normalize it. And this is something that I spoke to, some of my friends, is like part of what we do as women is to normalize certain experiences. So it becomes like, yeah, of course she would be doing that. But in any case, so I was told by my parents not to reveal too much about the fact that I was married, which also colored my experience when I was at Hopkins, until I decided I was no longer going to keep that a secret. I didn't care anymore. And you know what? I'm so glad I didn't, because I was really fortunate to have advisors who totally understood the time pressure I was under. So Professor Koresh and Brancati, the two folks I worked with most closely in studying the genetic epidemiology of type 2 diabetes and end-stage renal disease, they really helped me very quickly to identify my research focus and to figure out what lab I should be working in. And many thanks to Prof. Alan Schuldiner at the University of Maryland at that time, who allowed me to work in his lab and to do all of the lab work that I needed to do. And so because of that focus and the ability to identify a goal, even though it might seem silly to some people, my goal was to get to graduate and join my husband, because I was very clear in communicating that to my advisors. They were all on board to help me achieve that goal. So I suppose tip number one in this phase of, if those of you who are still studying, is to really clearly identify the timeline on which you are operating. What goal are you trying to achieve? And it might be as personal as mine was, or it could be very much professionally oriented, as in, I want to make sure I identify a postdoc in this area with this person by when. But to set the goals, you've got to have, you've heard of SMART goals before, right? And SMART can be defined in different ways, but you just got to be specific. You got to figure out what the motivation is, make it time bound. Look that up, SMART goals, if you're not familiar with it, because you can use that also to set your goals during your studying years, because that then will help you articulate it, communicate it to people who are supposed to help you achieve your goals. And I believe that that kind of focus will help you not lose your way, because, doing a doctor can be really tiring and confusing and stressful, and don't get lost along the way, because you don't want to be a doctoral student or an MPH student or a master's student forever, right? I think, although there are people who like to get their degrees. So that's a PhD phase of my life. So again, a lot of thanks to my Hopkins professors for helping me achieve my goal. And then after that, I joined my husband, and this started a 10-year journey during which I was a trailing spouse. Now, I'd never heard of the term trailing spouse before when I was in the US, but once you become an expat, and some of you might be living in countries that are not your home countries, and if you are married, you get called a trailing spouse. So for 10 years, essentially, because my husband's job demanded that he get posted to different stations around the region and the world in order for him to get the career experience he needed to advance along his career, we made the decision that I would follow him and find something to do. So I was very fortunate during the trailing spouse period, 10 years of my life. During our first posting, I did the traditional thing. I got my postdoc. And I don't think I need to tell any of you, if you're going to go down that path, how to get a postdoc. That's pretty obvious. But if you have questions about that, I can give you some tips there too. So the postdoc one is pretty clear, but it was then that I realized, because I move around so much, not trailing spouse. All right, Rymar says we should call ourselves accompanying spouses. I'm still kind of struggling with that, because I also you're right, I don't actually identify with being a trailing spouse after I've done it. I did it for a decade. So Weimar, you and I need to brainstorm about what the right term is. But those 10 years essentially also set me down a very interesting path that was right for me. Because when I was at Hopkins, I actually was on some research. I was on the CHOICE study. It's choices for options in end-stage renal disease. I can't remember, CHOICE is an acronym, okay? But the goal was to help patients understand that you could do peritoneal dialysis, you could do hemodialysis, different choices in end-stage renal disease care. And guess what? One of the things as a research assistant, as a doctoral student, that I had the delight to be able to do was to create the script, to create the video for patient recruitment. So when we were recruiting our subjects, we wanted to create materials for them, and we wanted to create this video for them. And I was tasked with doing it, and I loved it. Well, it comes back, because now I did my postdoc at National Taiwan University Hospital, but I realized that if I'm going to accompany my spouse to all of these different places for his job, I needed to find something more portable. So it was at that moment I realized that in Asia in particular, because we were staying in Asia for that point of time, that one of the main contributions I could make, the value that I could bring to the research community, was actually my English ability. Because if you think about it, often many of us take it for granted that we're going to be able to publish in the journals, hopefully the most applicable journal, right? So we want to publish, and we want to be able to do it easily. And when you're in the US, it's pretty straightforward, but in Asia, it's not so straightforward. And I believe that may still be the case, particularly for those whose English is not their strongest language. So I quickly realized during that time that was my value add. And so if you remember, I used to also do these videos and scripts and whatnot. That was another valued contribution I could make in Asia for those who needed to do that kind of work. So I moved into healthcare communications. Now, after the COVID pandemic, we all understand how important communications is. But back then, the idea of communications is still a bit vague. So I focused on scientific editing, publishing, to some degree, writing. And here's probably my second tip, which is that, there's a clear path for those of us who enter research or medicine. There's a clear path. But if you're starting to feel like you want to try something different, I would still say, I just showed you my strengths, right? Another version of it to think about how you start to try out different things is really focus on what you're good at. Because sometimes we do things like, oh, I'm not very strong in XYZ. And then you try to spend all this time trying to get better at it. I don't know. I think life is short. You should really focus on what you're good at and see if you can exploit it, see if you can develop it further. So I realized that I'd been working really hard on improving my writing. So I wanted to do that. So in that 10 years, I essentially focused on communications, becoming a better writer. And some of you might be too young to remember, but it was also the heyday of blogging. So I used that medium to also sharpen my writing and reach a larger audience. I was at the time the only science blogger focused on genomics and public health, genetics and public health. Genomics still wasn't that big back then. And I actually developed a somewhat of a reputation online for being the person who was tracking the development of the genome revolution and genetic testing and the implications on society. And so I took advantage of this new medium that people really, weren't too familiar with. So the first tip is rely on your strengths, see if there's a way to leverage it. And here's the thing, it's about strengths, right? I actually don't really believe in this passion thing, because passion to me can be really fickle. You can be really excited about something one minute and something changes, and maybe it's just me, but I'm like, ooh, shiny. So I gotta run off and do something else. So passion is very broad. So the first tip is, I believe in focusing on your strengths, really leveraging them and letting it drive you to where you need to be. The second thing I would say in this phase of life where you have just finished your degree and figuring out how to use it, the second tip I would say is looking at new ways of leveraging your newfound or newly developed skills, because it may not be what you think it's going to be. So in my day, it was this new way of communicating on the internet. I mean, I'm seriously old enough to remember when Google was new. Okay. So that's how old I am, when Yahoo was just a portal and search was new. So now we're on to the next phase of the internet, and we're talking about new ways of sharing scientific information through the use of blogging, right? Or other kinds of communications platforms. So nowadays, I don't know what that would be, right? If you're in communications, maybe you're making TikTok videos about science and epi and, Jon Snow, which is also pretty cool, because Twitter, in case you guys don't know, there's a Jon Snow account, neoliberal Jon Snow account on Twitter, making snarky comments about the COVID pandemic. But okay, so I'm getting sidetracked because I love that kind of stuff. So this is the phase of life where after you get your degree, do you want to stay and do research? And then how do you push yourself to discover new ways of doing what everybody is doing? Because that's going to be the differentiating factor for you. And how do you make yourself known to the right people so that you can advance towards your own goals? Because again, goal setting is important, right? I can't say I always write things down very clearly. The founder of Medtronic, he passed away a few years ago, but he's the one who invented the pacemaker. He, up until the time he died, every single year he would set goals for himself. So I think it is important for us to at least have an idea what our goals will be. So in those 10 years, what was my goal? My goal was to be able to develop a talent in communications that could be used in order to generate or create a job for myself, even though it had to be portable. And there's nothing better than a portable career, because life nowadays is so unpredictable, right? But on the other hand, if you don't need to be so flexible, then you think of other ways in which to leverage your strengths and again, push yourself to doing something new. Because new is what's going to differentiate you from the others. Because even in genetic epi back in the day, right? I mean, as soon as we could do genotyping, those of us, took advantage of that, went into the lab and did genotyping. Then after that, it was genome sequencing and RFLPs and whatever, SNPs. Gosh, it sounds really old. I think some of you are going to think I really don't know what I'm talking about. So that's 10 years, right? Right after you get your degree, how do you define yourself? How do you make yourself stand out? And then finally, in the third phase, before we go to all your great questions, the third phase of my life really is the corporate life. So after 10 years posting to all these different countries, my husband got called back to Singapore to head office, which is definitely the career plan for him. So we moved to Singapore, and by now I already had 2 children. So I had at that point a 6-year-old who was born in Japan. I had a 5-week-old who was born in the UK, London. And we moved back to Singapore. And the first thing I did, of course, was settle the children, make sure they were okay, but immediately start thinking about, well, gosh, we're going to be stable here. What should I do? So of course, the first thing you do is think, okay, go back to my roots. Do I want to go back to academia? Do I want to go to research? And Singapore is an amazing place for all of that. So I did explore But at the same time, because of all of the 10 years I'd spent developing my communication skills, I had a very unique opportunity. Ogilvy and Mather, now they call themselves Ogilvy, the advertising and communications agency, a real juggernaut in the world of advertising. And if you're interested in communications, David Ogilvy, the founder of Ogilvy and Mather, has some fascinating books about how to communicate. Ogilvy came and recruited me to be part of an account. And they needed a mother, they needed someone who understood science, all this kind of stuff. It just all came together. So I spent 6 years at Ogilvy running the healthcare communications practice. And if I'm right, there's a Vivian Tam on this call. I don't know if she's still on. And I don't know, Vivian, if you're my Vivian who used to be on my team at Ogilvy. But I had a wonderful team. Yeah, oh my gosh, it's Vivian. That's so amazing. So, I got to work with awesome people like Vivian at Ogilvy, where we delivered for our clients all the way from pharma to med tech to even the government, everything from product launches to PR to digital to medical education. And through that process, I really got to understand corporate life. I got to meet clients and their corporate problems. But it was a learning process. And how did I get comfortable in that corporate life is, I wasn't really afraid to look dumb. But I also really wasn't afraid to stand up for myself and for my team. And so I suppose that's the next tip. In that phase of your life, if you're interested in going into corporate, leaving research and all of that, you still have to remember who you are and have confidence, because that's what attracts people, right? And it helps you be successful, is to be able to know what you stand for. And I always tell my team, like, please do not let people bully you, because end of day, we're trying to do a good job. And corporate life can be really, really hard in that way. So after 6 years at Ogilvy, I was recruited to join Medtronic. And as I mentioned, Medtronic is a medtech company, the largest independent medtech company in the world. I was first corporate communications, which was really weird because, again, corporate life is new to me. But communications is not new to me. And so I joined first to do corporate comms. And when you're in a good company, they'll also look at you and they'll say, what talents do you have that we are not leveraging? And that's what my old boss used to say to me. He was a great boss. He's still with the company. And what he said to me was, what talents do you have that we're not leveraging? I said, well, you might remember I am a scientist, I'm an epidemiologist, blah, blah, blah. And he says, okay. So he gave me the opportunity to run the value-based healthcare strategy for the company in the region, to lead it and to see what we could do in the region. For those of you who are involved in health policy, research, all of that, just know, right? Like, value-based healthcare is one of the concepts, but you got to bring it to life. And so I guess that's the second tip I have under this corporate, if you're interested in a corporate world, is that being scientists, and for some of us clinicians and whatnot, it's very easy for us to get lost in the theory of things. And as I remember my husband's godmother or godfather would say, oh, you scientists, you have no idea what's on the ground. Well, that's going to be the challenge, is to prove we do understand what's happening in the real world and on the ground. And when you're in the corporate world, you really have to demonstrate that ability to understand that, and to also, of course, make money. And that's where I moved into, when you talk about value-based healthcare, how the company can be involved, it has to have a commercial angle. I then moved back to sort of my roots to run medical and scientific affairs for the region. And again, how do we help the company talk about what we do from a medical point of view, from a scientific innovation point of view, and make it understandable to our customers, who are the physicians, help them, connect with the buyers, who are the hospitals. And so it's a very real kind of world, because you're trying to make money, you're trying to make science understandable and applicable. And so this corporate part of my life really was about 10 years as well. I guess my life runs in decades, huh? So I had a decade of corporate life. And so here I am today. How did I get to AmCham? What's the Chamber of Commerce? Chamber of Commerce is actually where I grew up during those 10 years of my corporate life. I didn't know much about what it was like to be in a company. I had many clients who were companies. I better learn quick. A Chamber of Commerce in the US and elsewhere, but particularly in the international market, is where the leading companies get together to talk about shared issues, share best practices. And so I showed up at the chamber and met people from across all industries. So that's the other tip, is if you're interested in a corporate life, it's no good saying, I'm a healthcare specialist, so I'm just going to stay in healthcare. please do find either your nearest chamber or other opportunities where you get to meet with other business leaders and learn about big picture problems. Like right now, all of you might be aware, supply chain issues because of the pandemic, trade issues, the President Biden's interest, and then the geopolitical conflicts. Those are all things that matter to businesses. And so if you want to have an interest in corporate life, the tip would be develop an interest in the world. And you can do that by going to someplace like the American Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. Now, how did I end up leading the American Chamber of Commerce? I actually, because I showed up, I originally at Ogilvy, I showed up at the chamber so I could meet people and learn from them. Then I was elected healthcare committee co-chair. So start to look for these leadership opportunities for yourself that isn't necessarily within your company. So community leadership, if you like to volunteer, that's probably the next tip is expand your world beyond just your work. Lift your head up and get inspiration and energy from not just your own organization, no matter where you're at, but go out and meet people who do different things than you, right? So that's also a very important thing to do. So then after that, I was elected to the board. And then when I was thinking about leaving Medtronic, and I saw someone with a question about having children and babies and the whole thing, I've made a lot of choices because I needed to make sure that my family was doing well. That's the other thing. So when I decided to leave Medtronic was primarily because I had two children, one of which who was applying to college. The other one was about to take a very important national exam here in Singapore. And I looked at my calendars before COVID, and I said, I cannot travel half the time as I was when I was with Medtronic. So I decided to step down, and coincidentally, while I was on the board, the previous leader of the chamber was on her way out, and I applied for the job, and that's how I ended up here. So serendipity, that's another tip for you. Take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. Maybe not every, okay, be a little bit more discerning, but opportunities come, they can surprise you. And in that sense, take a look at what you're interested in. And again, your goal, and if this can service your goal, and take advantage of it, right? Because I'm now here at the chamber. I've been the CEO for over 2 years. I've also continued my side gig, as Anna said, being connected to the School of Public Health. I don't think I would have thought that I'd be able to bring those two worlds together. And it's a bad thing, but also there've been good things that have happened during the pandemic. I think COVID has also helped us realize that those of us on this call who are in healthcare, who have a public health background, we have so much to contribute, and people finally understand better what exactly the heck we do. And I bet those of us who are epidemiologists now don't have to explain what epidemiology is as often as we used to. And, if you'd have told me back in the days when I was at Hopkins that you're going to run the Chamber of Commerce, you're going to represent the business community, I'd have been like, huh? No, I don't do that, right? I'm an epidemiologist, but over the course of the last 30 years, I mentioned I'm turning 50. These opportunities have come along, and being goal-oriented, having a good sense of what my strengths are, and then also figuring out, how to get a better understanding of the world around me has helped me develop an appreciation. And those of you who are in DC, those of you who are still at Hopkins, I really envy you. If I had gone down a different track, you do the what if game, which I never do, which is the reason why my talk is about don't look back. But on the other hand, sometimes it's a little fun to conjecture. I really had thought to myself, it would be super cool if once I was done at Hopkins that I could go to DC and help to contribute to policy making, help to help others have a scientific lens. And I still do that here in Singapore as much as I'm able to help companies look at things scientifically. And of course, with the pandemic, there's a greater appreciation for it. But those of you who are in the DC area, who are with Hopkins, I do hope you take advantage of this amazing thing, which is that you have the power to connect public health with business, with policy. And that's what I try to do every day still. And in that sense, my goals haven't really changed all that much because everything is there and everything is here. So, and that's pretty much in a very long-winded way, telling you about my 3-part journey over the last about 30 years.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your journey. You gave so many tips. I was gonna try to coalesce and bring everything together. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. So here's some great takeaways that I heard. Passion is fickle, but your strengths are key, and you've used your strengths to open doors or force doors open, however you want to say. I love the advice that you gave about showing up and looking for opportunities, both within and outside of your company, right? Expanding your world, whether that's, maintaining interests or networking, right? Getting that inspiration and energy from different people and places, I think is another component to having doors be open for opportunities, right? That can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to come from your insular community. I also loved that you talked about different identities, right? Things you did identify with, right? You said early on, I'm an epidemiologist. I identify that way. And then using the term trailing spouse, but then saying, well, I'm not sure that I actually identify as that. I think this idea of our identities really come together within leadership, and interesting to hear you reflect on that. And then speaking of reflection, the final thing I'll say is, you talked about using different moments in your life, maybe even your decades, as critical points of reflection and thinking about goals and next steps. And I love that because I think that self-reflection, that self-awareness is really key to the goal setting that you raised, right? This idea that you should be creating goals for yourself and that you can use milestones or moments to help reconsider what some of your goals might be. We've got lots of questions.
Anna, let me add a little bit more on that self-reflection piece. I think self-awareness is incredibly important. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect at it, but as much as possible, I think the key to successful leadership is being very aware of your strengths, as I mentioned, but also where your weaknesses are, right? And to be consistently delving into yourself so that you can improve. The other thing is also, mental wellness, mental well-being, health has fortunately started to become a topic of conversation. And I'm definitely unashamed to say that regular therapy sessions for tune-ups, if you have access to it, please do take advantage of it, because I had kind of mentioned anxiety before, and I'll be very forthcoming to say that throughout the periods of my life, whether it has something to do with my children, whether it's something to do with my job, who knows what's going on in my head. And at 50, let's not be ashamed to say we go through menopause, right? I don't know where I'm at with that, but anxiety is a real thing. And if you feel it, please, go and talk to someone about it. And I really want to emphasize that point, because it's helped me a lot to understand myself and give me the tools so I can be a better person.
Do you think there are unique barriers that you have faced as an Asian woman in Asia when it comes to that self-care, or seeking help or talking about these types of things? I mean, you talked about some of those personal experiences early on trying to find a job. How do you think that that's changed?
I think that particularly because of the pandemic, there's more open conversation. But compared to the US, where I do think people are just more, sometimes it's TMI, right? Too much information. You're like, hello. But in Asia, people are still a little bit more reserved. And we're trying to break that. There are many of us who are out there talking about these issues, bringing awareness to business leaders, saying this impacts your bottom line, right? But as an Asian woman, I mean, so this is the weird thing. I'm now an Asian woman in Asia. I ain't that special anymore. But then when I was an Asian woman in the US, maybe there was more of a differentiation. So, I still very much identify as an Asian American, but now that I've been out of the US since 98, I will have to say to those of you who are Asian American in the US, probably I don't understand your experience as well, because I haven't been in the US as long. I've been in Asia surrounded by Asians. It's different. Yeah.
There are quite a few questions around having children and balancing that, or I don't even actually think people have used the word balance, more like navigating, right? So how do you navigate these professional environments, trying to identify leadership opportunities, maybe even pursuing PhDs? What are some practical tips or reflections that you have about that period, especially when your kids were younger?
So I tell you, I told you I'm a mother. I told you I have 2 kids, but I also have a little bit of an allergy to talking too much about being a mother, because frankly, caregiving isn't limited to being a mother, right? Caregiving can mean taking care of your parents or relatives or even your pet. I'm really more of an equal opportunity caregiver when it comes to thinking about the impact that has on your working life, because it is very hard to split your brain when you're at work. Oh, so this is me, a little random, but hopefully entertaining. There's a show on Apple TV Plus called somebody help me, Apple TV Plus, where essentially you could have an implant put into your head. And when you're at work, you're one person with one set of memories. Severance. Yes. Right. So, we can't do that. That show's not real, in case you didn't know. But it's fascinating to think that we have to separate, our work lives and our personal lives. So on that front, yes, I will tell you about childbearing, child rearing and whatnot, but I also don't want any of you who are not mothers to feel alienated by this conversation. So do know that I'm very mindful of substitute caregiving. My father was sick for quite some time. Caregiving is another piece of it. From the kids' point of view, I'm a little bit tough on this one because, first of all, I think you got to make your family number one, okay? And I have been very resentful in the past. I'm going to be very honest with you. So I am the primary caregiver for my children. I am the lead parent, and that's exactly, I'm comfortable with that, right? My husband and I have this arrangement, and I'm totally comfortable with it. But when I entered corporate life, work became more demanding. And it's not just corporate life that's demanding. You may be a principal investigator, same kind of in demanding, all that kind of stuff. There have been moments where I felt very resentful and not happy because I felt hindered. I wanted to spend more time at work. And I think maybe Vivian hadn't joined me already at Ogilvy by then, but in my first year at Ogilvy, I actually missed my daughter's second birthday because I had to work on a project. And in advertising, things are just like on all the time. So there are going to be times where you're going to make some choices. Maybe it's not going to, be good for your work or for your kids, but you make your choice and you do you. I don't have any regrets. Remember the title of my talk, Don't Look Back. I don't have any regrets because for that moment in time, I made the best decision I could and I was okay with it. But frankly, I have made a lot of decisions because of family reasons. And I was talking to a friend today. I even make decisions. I suit me. Okay. Take care of number one. That's my other tip. Take care of number one, yourself, because nobody else is going to care about you as much as you do. I even make my decision based on the kind of commute I'm going to have. So when I was in Taiwan, I had two opportunities, right? One opportunity was more prestigious, but required like 3 bus rides or something crazy like that, 2-hour commute on 3 bus routes. I'm like, heck no. So I took the other one, which is just as good, but maybe not as prestigious because I had a 40-minute bus ride. That's okay. I'm happy with that. Don't look back.
Yeah, I love that. Part of that comes back to like your values and your goals. Like, do you value your time? Are you fine with that commute? Are you not? I think that's kind of really fantastic advice, that it could be as simple as, do I have to be on the bus for 2 hours or 40 minutes? It makes a lot of sense. Okay, we've got a question from Tina. She says, I wonder if you have advice for early career women who are trying to build their professional identities, like their expertise and their strengths, and stay focused to advance in their professional journey, especially when there are institutional challenges and barriers.
Okay, this is a complicated one. It's a 3-parter. I think for your identity, it's an evolving thing, right? Because in your 20s, in your 30s, and your 40s, now I'm entering my 50s, your core identity, you need to define that very well. When I said about seeking help from, therapy or whatnot, not being ashamed of it, the other piece of the puzzle for me in terms of getting support I need is executive coaching. And I started doing that when I was at Medtronic because I was at quite a senior level and really felt that I needed to fine tune what I do. So my executive coach was first working with me on my identity. And he said, for most people, it takes 2 or 3 sessions. I'm like, I don't think it's going to take that long for me. 1 session's enough. And he's like, no. Everybody says that, but it takes 2 or 3 sessions. I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I did it. It really honestly took me 1 session because all these years, as I mentioned to you, my core identity is still in public health. So I think as you're defining your identity, you just have to keep doing that digging about who you like to be known as. When people talk about you, what do you want them to say about you? And I think that's the easiest question, right? And who do you want to, when you write about yourself, what do you want to, what do you want to lead with? So I think the identity part is probably, in some ways you can define it and it's iterative. And so just keep writing it down and thinking about it. I'm going back to your question, okay, because it's a 3-parter. The institutional challenging and advancing in your professional journey, frankly, I don't think anybody intends to hold a woman back. I think a lot of times it's, what is it called? Unconscious bias, right? or things that, oop, it just happened. So one thing that really infuriates me is manels. Oh, that really infuriates me. But I don't think people intentionally put together a manel. It's just that they're not paying attention. So as a woman leader, and all of us are leaders, have no doubt about that. Sometimes you just have to point it out. And you don't have to do it in a really rude way or a very obnoxious way, but you just got to point it out. So if it's not manels, which is my pet peeve, but it could be where you feel that there's an opportunity that you would take advantage of, and not to how do I say, be quiet about it. And again, there's no need to be offensive or abrasive. Nobody needs to do that, man or woman, but you don't need to be quiet about it. These institutional challenges are often there because nobody thought to question it and nobody actually even noticed. So it's okay if you raise it. Hope that helps.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's important to raise these issues, raise awareness among different groups, but you can do it in a way that actually gets people to notice and affect change. There are some questions about venturing into global health with or without a doctoral degree. And this is a question we often get. Do you think a PhD or a DRPH is a must to advance your career in global health? What do you think about this?
Guess what? In my day, if you wanted to be an epidemiologist, it was like, you need to get an MD. And I still remember when I was an undergrad in the early 90s, I went to get a recommendation letter from a PhD prof. So he didn't have an MD, but he was in the School of Medicine. And he said, you want to go do what? He goes, usually epidemiologists get the most respect if you have an MD. And I said, but I'm not interested in getting an MD. And he said, well, maybe you'll be the one. You'll be the one who's going to help people respect PhDs in epidemiology. So I thought that was really empowering, because he wasn't saying he wasn't going to write me a reference letter, because there's no point, because I wasn't going to go for a medical degree. The same thing for DRPH and PhDs. I think it does help open doors. It just makes life a little bit easier, but it's not like it's that easy to get a PhD, right? There's many different variables involved in deciding to pursue a PhD. It's not that easy for everyone. And I did it quite young too, right? So I didn't have as many things to worry about. I think that there are always going to be prejudices, but I think also global health is not, a monolith, right? There's many different aspects that you can get involved in global health. So find the area in which you can make your unique contributions to be able to provide value. And if that does not require a PhD or a DRPH, and likely there are opportunities like that out there, you can still make tremendous contributions, because frankly, global health also requires people who are good at organization, who are good at project management, who are good at finances. If you have skills that can be of value, of contribution to global health, there is a role for you. But there are things where you will need a PhD, right? Doing research or something like that. The truth is, I'm not a global health person either. I am trained as an epidemiologist, and I had this pipe dream that I wanted to do global health. Well, then I went, and being, again, very frank, right? I actually decided to go for an interview. So it was for a professor role. Went through a few rounds of interviews. I did the written test. I did the whole thing. I made it through several rounds. And then I had a panel interview. And then I had a technical person on the panel interview. And he kept asking me questions about program evaluation and whatever. And I'm thinking, dude, I'm a PhD epidemiologist, on top of which I haven't done research in however long. If that's a person you're looking for, it isn't going to be me. That's not the role I'm going to play in global health. I'm still convinced I made contributions to global health, but it wasn't going to be in the way that guy wanted, which was the technical side of things. You can find a role. You don't have to do it the way everybody else does it.
That's right. I think, and it's also about, that comes back to knowing your strengths, right? If you know your strengths and you can be really clear and honest, right? You don't have to take every opportunity. You said this earlier, you don't have to take every opportunity, like, yes, embrace them, right? But not everything is going to be a good fit for you. And the more you can reflect and know yourself, know your strengths, know your goals, the more you can know if that aligns for you. I know we're at time, but I've got a few more questions. Can I keep going a little bit?
I'm okay if everybody else is okay.
Let's just keep going, and we'll see if people are okay with it. So I think in that same vein, there's a question: how do you sell your vision on public health in a corporate world where most people might not have any idea of what you do, and you have to sort of like sell yourself, sell your strengths, also sell public health?
In some ways, it's easier now, isn't it? Because we've had COVID-19, people understand the importance of public health. But in terms of selling, I think you're absolutely right. This is where the communications piece really comes in. If you get a chance to check out this book by Daniel Pink, the title is To Sell is Human. And I can't remember, and I keep picking on Vivian if she's still on from the UK, but I used to give this book to my team because, first of all, we were in a selling business because we were in an advertising agency, correct? But you are spot on in using that term because we all have to sell our ideas. And how do we sell our ideas? We have to do it by selling ourselves. We have to be credible. We have to be trustworthy. So I think it's more that than anything else. You hone yourself and the message that you want to communicate, and then you'll be able to sell it in a very trustworthy fashion. So as you're thinking about how you're going to sell public health, you're not really selling public health, you're selling yourself, right? And you're the embodiment of what you can do for public health and the importance of it. And it is important as you're looking at career opportunities, or even if you're currently in a role that you have no intention of leaving, which is awesome. But every single day you're thinking, I love talking about goals, right? What am I trying to accomplish today? What am I trying to sell? We really are selling every single day. To think about it from that angle, I think may help in kind of refining your message. But you don't need to sell public health. Public health already sold itself. What you're trying to do is sell your own credibility, your own skills, knowledge, and thinking about how do you communicate your expertise. And you can do it because you know what you're doing.
That's right, because you've been focusing on your strengths and getting all of these skills. All right, this is a question for me. You talked a lot about life, including many elements, right? Many different types of decisions, whether it's family, personal, whatever. And that we need to be able to find enabling environments that support family life and support our personal decisions. What has been your own experience as a leader in facilitating environments that support other women?
This is another one where I might be a little bit controversial. Remember earlier, I don't like to get too involved in discussions just about motherhood because that's really very alienating. Even in creating an enabling environment, I think you said specifically for women, right? Mm-hmm. Any enabling environment that's good for women is also good for men, or any gender, right? It's good for everybody. So this enabling environment is really thinking about, and I know it's a catchword now, and I work on it a lot, a catchphrase: diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Because an enabling environment means that we see different faces, we have different points of view, it's diverse. But we also need to make sure it's inclusive, means you get a seat at the table, but you also feel included to voice your opinions. And then the equity piece, you've all seen the people standing on different blocks or being given different kinds of bicycles, right? Equality versus equity, that piece too, right? How do we find ways to customize in a working environment, for example, to customize the leadership training opportunities, to customize what each person needs to feel empowered and able to contribute their best. Everybody's going to need something different to get them to that place where they're 110% contributing, right? And also feeling really good about themselves. So this enabling environment isn't just for women. This enabling environment is for everyone. The reason why we always talk about women, but we could just as well substitute that with Asian talent. Silicon Valley has a terrible issue where particular ethnic groups never seems to make it all the way up to the C-suite, right? Or very rarely, it's an imbalance. Oh, well, how about age? I told you, and I see Sharon's also turning 50 like me, yay. There's a generations issue, right? Age, diversity, equity, inclusion isn't just about gender, but we talk about women because it's an obvious one. It seems like it would be an easy solve. But an enabling environment means
easy solve.
Yeah. Well, compared to everything else, right? So we think, oh, low hanging fruit, we've been talking about it forever. Let's get this thing done. But I actually prefer to think about an enabling environment that helps everyone. And I like to think of an enabling environment that customizes or makes adaptations and is flexible for every individual's need, whether they're facing challenges due to gender, age, neurodiversity, disability, whatever. So that's kind of my approach. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is really about creating spaces tailored to individuals, considering their intersectional identities, right? We're not just thinking about gender, but also the role of race, age, disability, et cetera. I think that's great. Okay, I think people are still eager to be on, but I think that we've gone over time and we've answered most questions. There's a block of questions that I think I know your answer to, but I'm going to post it to you anyway, because we have a
Okay.
number of people saying, I want to transition, or I'm early in my career. What are the most essential skills that I need and what I can focus on? And I can get, based on your talk, I'm going to guess, or I could guess, but I'm going to let you answer it instead.
First of all, give yourself some time, okay? My general rule of thumb for anything is 6 months. Now, for a career transition, it's probably going to take a little bit longer than that, but you might even want to give yourself 6 months to percolate the idea of making a career transition. And during the 6 months, as you are exploring, a lot of it is, I know Anna's picked up on this, and I hope you did too. You got to start to set some goals for yourself. And it's beyond like, oh, I need to get a new job in 6 months. That's not, I mean, that's a goal, I guess. But your goal is really like, what do you want to achieve? What in terms of impact on the world? What is your, again, your unique contribution, the value that you bring? That's a lot more important to define, because then that helps you to figure out what role this career thing is going to satisfy these demands that you have. Here's another one. My executive coach said I'm very demanding of my bosses. And I'm like, what? Is it so demanding that my bosses have integrity? And, but he's right, because I know that about myself. I'm not one of those people who can go to a job and not care what my boss says. As long as I keep my head down, get my job done, my boss leaves me alone, I'm happy. I'm not happy with that. I have demands of my bosses. So even those things, right? You really got to figure out what is important to you. And then you can go on that career transition hunt and figure out what the right role for you. Because if you don't know yourself, what are you looking for? You don't even know what you're looking for because you don't know yourself well enough. So setting goals, right? Setting goals, figuring out what's important to you. What is your core identity? And then giving yourself enough time to explore opportunities. On the exploring opportunities front, it's not like I can quote you a study, but plenty of people they say, apparently there's data and evidence to show that women really do not network as well as men, right? And I do believe there is data to show, right? Like this golfing thing, the sports thing, that seems to really connect
even
men
like
very
drinking
quickly.
and happy
Oh,
hours.
beer summits, right? I think we call them beer summits. So all those kinds of things. Well, how do women like to network? We need to figure that out, because you got to push yourself to get out there. And hey, I'm in a job where I'm like networking all the live long day. And even I am like, oh man, tonight I had to go to this event where the US ambassador was there, who I already know, but yeah, I feel kind of like uptight about it. I got invited to this event where I was kind of surprised I was invited, because it was sort of a rivals event. I got invited. I felt uncomfortable. I showed up. The only thing you tell yourself on a networking front, and you got to do it because that's where the opportunities come, right? The exposure, understanding of the world, what's out there. Find a way to network. And I'm not quite sure in your world what the right networking opportunity is. All I tell myself is, I don't really want to go, but I'm going to go. And as soon as I meet, you can decide your number. For me, it's I meet 2 new people, then I can go. By the time you meet 2 new people, you're comfortable already and you're fine. But women tend not to network as well as men, and men network themselves to new opportunities. So no joke, that's another piece of what you got to do.
That's so wonderful. First of all, I will say we have been doing some research into how women like to network, and we'll be publishing a paper on that pretty soon as part of a special issue on this initiative. So I'm really glad you raised it. For those in the chat, we've been posting some links if you want to join our network, which is in our Slack workspace. It's an amazing place to get to meet other amazing people who are really working on their leadership journey and engaging in activities with each other all over the world. Hsien, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to
thank you for having me
here, even though I feel like we could just talk forever about these things. A number of people have asked if the recording will be shared. Yes, it will be on our YouTube channel, and we'll also send it around via email to everyone who showed up today. So thank you to our amazing participants who were wildly active in the chat and in Q&A. And Hsien, thank you so much for joining us this evening, even after your fancy event. And
which I escaped happily to join you. So
well, you've already
thank
met
you.
People, so you escaped. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful evening for those of you in Asia. And just thank you so much for spending time with us today to share your journey. It was truly lovely. Great way to start the day for us.
Take care, everyone. See you somewhere.